Hey everyone, Jonathan Bailor back. Very, very excited about today's show. Going to be a unique and insightful one. Very, very cool writer and editor with us. She is the co-author of the Patient Money column for the New York Times for 3 years and is the former deputy editor of Real Simple, as well as a staff writer for Money. She has contributed to all sorts of national publications like Everyday Health and Parenting, and she edited First Impressions, what you don't know about how others see you, which has been translated into over 24 languages. On top of all of that, she lives with her family in Brooklyn. She's a certified yoga instructor, and she has become an expert on time, how we spend it, how we perceive it. Her new book is called The Book of Times. Lesley Alderman, welcome to the show.
My pleasure to be with you.
Well, Lesley, let's just start a few steps back. Let's go back in time. Your book is called The Book of Times. Can you tell us a little bit about the book itself and what inspired you to write a book about time?
Sure. I have always been kind of obsessed with time, I have to admit. I mean, I was the child who wrote my schedule on the blackboard for the evening. I seem to, just enjoy parsing time. And then, I became very involved in things like yoga and meditation and realized that maybe I should fight against that a little bit because it was making me not always in the moment. But this book sprang out of that kind of tug, push and pull between being very interested in how the time passes and also not wanting it to ruin the day-to-day of my life. So my obsession morphed into something much larger, though, rather than just the tick-tock of my hours and my day, into sort of the tick-tock of the world at large. So I began to think, well, gosh, I know it takes me 4.5 minutes to walk from my house in Brooklyn to the subway around the corner, but if I'm so interested in that, other people must measure things as scrupulously as well. And you find you know exactly how long people have measured how long it took to build a building or build a bridge, or how much time we spend as a society watching television, a frightening amount, by the way, how much time we spend eating, sleeping, drinking, how long it takes for us to fall in love, how long we stay in love before it morphs into something that isn't as tortured as romantic love. So this sort of little myopic obsession of mine really morphed into something larger. And I'd done all this writing for Real Simple and Money Magazine, so I was very involved in statistics and sort of looking at how we parse time. How long, do we hold investments? And at Real Simple, how long does it take to fry an egg? So I had, my professional work also made me quite focused on time and the passing of time. So that's it.
Well,
in a long-winded way.
No, it's awesome. The book is a very fascinating one. I've actually been very much enjoying it. And it seems like, and I'm sure you intended this, that the book is insightful on two levels. One, listeners, as you can tell by what Lesley just mentioned, there's all kinds of very interesting, just let's call them sound bites in the book. Like, how long does it take to wash your clothes or drink? I mean, just like random interesting things. But then there's this level on top of it, Lesley, of a much deeper analysis of our perception of time and how we might be able to change or optimize that to live our lives better. Could you tell us what your conclusions were in that space?
Sure. I do think there is the once you start paying attention to time, can go in a couple of ways. You can be kind of obsessed with being efficient and getting things done because it's very satisfying to be efficient and get things done. But it can really take away from that sort of lovely, random, in the moment feeling. So there were certain things that I found very interesting just about what makes our life feel more valuable. And one of the things is the way we spend it and the way we spend our time. And it's one of the things we really do have quite a bit of control over, unless you're, a prisoner or something, or you're in the army and you're completely bossed around and your time is not really your own. Your discretionary time really is yours to spend as you see fit. And a lot of people get bound up in obligations and uncomfortable obligations and tend not to really evaluate them. But one of the things that scientists and social scientists, psychologists have studied is that connections are extremely important, right, to us, who we spend time with, what we do during that time. So the most gratifying thing to people really when they think about it is their connections to other people, but they're often complain that they don't get to spend enough time with the people that are most important. So I'd say, one of the first things you can do to make your life more satisfying is to think about the people that really do make you happy and find ways to spend more time with them. And also the kinds of activities that you do in your discretionary time. Shopping is lots of fun. I love to shop online in particular, but, if that is edging out things like, spending meaningful time with your girlfriends, boyfriends, whomever, or reading something that will be very enriching to you, then you're shortchanging yourself. And one of the other interesting things is, we're human. We're not always at our optimum, and so we tend to do things with our free time that are kind of expedient, like watch TV. Again, not slamming TV. I have to get my Mad Men fix, just like many people have to get their other fix, right? But those tend to be very expedient, and if you're doing, then they tend to be passive, and if you're doing a lot more of passive activities rather than active activities, you could be shortchanging yourself. For instance, you come home from work, you're tired, you'd like to just sit down, have a glass of wine, watch TV, or listen to music. All of those things are fine, but lacing up your shoes, maybe going out for a walk, taking your dog out for a walk, taking your partner out for a walk, seeing things, interacting with people on the street, those sorts of active pursuits are the things that people report being more satisfying. So it's not just some psychologist saying, you need to do this. This is going to make you happier. It's what people actually report. They say active activities, active leisure pursuits, I should say, are things that bring them more satisfaction. So it's just sort of looking at the balance, like how much TV do you watch? How much time do you just sort of hang around the house? Chilling in terms of, in comparison to maybe going out and hearing music or seeing a concert or mixing it up with your friends or exercising. You're doing things that are just more active and where you're more in control and you're less passive. So those are things, the ways you can spend your time that should bring you more satisfaction.
Lesley, I want to get a little bit metaphysical here, if you don't mind, and I haven't completely wrapped my head around the question I'm about to ask you, so if it's confusing, don't assume I'm not phrasing it well, not that you're not understanding it. So in your exploration of time, it seems so often we tend to think and we do, in one sense, have a fixed amount of time, right? It's a limited resource, only 24 hours in a day. But at the same time, there seems to be research suggesting, even common sense says, for example, if you need to cut your lawn and you do that using scissors, it will, let's say I have to cut my lawn today and all I know of to cut things with is scissors. So it takes me 5 hours to cut my lawn, cutting it with scissors. Then all of a sudden I discover powered lawn mowers. And I'm like, wow, I can still cut my lawn, but I can cut it in 30 minutes. And this idea that with either the proper tools or the proper insight or the proper technology or the proper mindset, we can actually make more time. In the lawn cutting example, what used to take 5 hours only now takes 5 minutes, and we have essentially made 4 hours and 55 minutes because we have to cut our lawn, but once it's done, we get that time back. Have you found ways or paradigms around making more time by discovering new technologies or approaches to multiply time?
Such a great question. How can you multiply time? Well, one thing that those that study these sorts of things, so it's not just off the top of my head, but those that study these sorts of things find that when you're paying attention, you're really paying attention to what's going on, meaning you're not walking down the street texting. You feel time as being more expansive. So you're it's like all senses are on alert. You're seeing, you're hearing, maybe you're tasting something, you're smelling what's around you, the time seems larger and your life seems larger. So the whole sort of, you've heard it a million times that multitasking is not good. Well, this is another reason, because you're sort of only half in the moment, in both moments, but the text you're sending or the walk you're taking, you're sort of just giving each one short shrift. The other interesting thing is that this is a very specific example, but if you're looking back on your year, let's say, you're doing your New Year's thing and it's, December 31st, 2012, and you're thinking about the year that passed. If you focus on what you accomplished, I did this, we moved into a new house, we adopted a dog, a child, whatever. You focus on that positive stuff and you really think about it. You're going to be much happier and more and satisfied, and you're going to feel like your time, the year was good and a big, full, long year. Then if you focus on, I didn't lose those 10 pounds I wanted to lose, I didn't get a new job, I didn't, do this or that. So if you really focus, without being so Pollyanna, on what you've done to fill your time well, you're going to feel like that year was a big, rich year and it didn't just whiz by. So there's something about a positive attitude too. Again, let's not go overboard here. That makes time and the time you've spent seem richer, fuller, and not something that's flying by and out of your control.
I love that. I want to dig more into this idea of non-linear time, or just changing our perception of time. And one thing, Lesley, is that oftentimes, no pun intended, we hear people say things like, I don't have time to do X, where X is this thing that makes them healthier, whether it's spend more time with their family or go for a walk or spend more time outside or read or exercise or eat more healthily. They say, I don't have time to do that. But if we look at time non-linearly, saying that it's not just about going to work, for example, it's about doing good work when you're at work. Like if you're at work and it takes you 1 hour to make $1 million worth of sales and it takes your friend 20 hours to make $1 million worth of sales, well, you can go home maybe. So it seems like oftentimes when people do these lifestyles that enable them to be healthier, that actually enables them to have more time in certain ways. Like if you ask someone who eats very healthfully, how do you have time to eat healthfully? I think they'll often say, I don't have time to not eat healthfully because if I got sick for 2 weeks, my life would fall apart. So what are your thoughts on this? How do you do this in spite of having to spend your time on these life-bettering activities versus perceiving these life-bettering activities as you can do all these things because you do them?
Yeah, that's a very enlightened way of thinking, that it's very hard if you're not in that groove, if you're sort of time pressed, can't get to the gym, eating out of the vending machine. It's very hard to get out of that rut. But I think that once you do, you do realize that, guess what? If you sleep 7 hours, if you drink a lot of water every day, if you eat well, you're going to feel better and more productive and have less lost days than if you don't do those sorts of things. So there is something about taking care of your health that does seem to expand time and just make your time better, doesn't it? Like, I am just now on this new kick of drinking water because I always did, but I took an overseas flight, which just makes you feel sort of horrible the next day. Even if you wake up, and you're in Kathmandu or Paris, you still, you're dehydrated. You've been sitting crumpled up in some uncomfortable seat. So that the day that I arrived at my destination, I drank 3 liters of water, throughout the day. And I felt pretty good. And the next day I thought, that was kind of great. I think I'll keep doing that. So now I'm on this huge kick of drinking a ton of water throughout the day. And I really do feel better. I just don't feel as tired and headachy. Where I am right now, it's like raining cats and dogs. So it's kind of strange because it's so humid out to be drinking all this water. But I do feel better. And I think it just makes me more productive. And literally, I work at home. Literally, before I got on this kick I would find in the afternoon I had to take a 20-minute nap. I just had to. And of course I could because I was at home. Since I've been drinking all this water, I don't take naps. I really am like ready to do a commercial for Evian. I'm such a zealot about this. So there is something about all that you do make better use of your time. Or, you have to be, for the person who says, I can't do this, I can't do that. You just have to sit down and think, okay, really, like what can I do? Can I ride my bike to work? Can I stand up and pace at my desk when I'm on the phone? Can I, there are a million ways to get things in to make your life a little healthier. It's just forming a habit and sticking with it long enough so that it becomes a true habit.
And it's such a profound, I think a lot of this stuff is, it's certainly emotional, and we've got to have a deeper motivation to do it. And we all know we have 24 hours in a day, but when we see, so you ain't gonna get more than 24 hours in a day, but you can certainly be a version of you who can do better and more in 24 hours. I mean, in one sense, life is just a series of problems we need to solve. And if you can solve those problems in half the time because your mind is operating at 100% rather than 50%, you now have twice as much time in effect.
That's true. More efficient mind certainly helps you gain more free time. And I think people who all of a sudden have children or all of a sudden have a new pet or something happens to really contract their time often find themselves becoming more efficient. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's just kind of imposing that structure on yourself so that you have to do things, you have to find ways to solve problems more quickly. Do you know what I mean? And so that might mean I've got to be healthier because I have to leave work at 7 p.m. every day to get home and take care of my infant or whatever. And all of a sudden you just find yourself being more efficient and cutting out things that are a drag on your time.
And also, Lesley, did you see things in your studies of time of how much time, so let's focus on the family for a second. Certainly when we have an interpersonal rift, that takes a lot of time. Like if you get in an argument with a person, the sort of baggage and strained conversations that will ensue take a lot of time. So even if we're not talking about a professional circumstance, from an interpersonal relationship, if we're in a good place, do you have any insights on how much time we might save simply because we will avoid interpersonal conflict?
Yeah, I think some people, that's such a good question. I think some people like interpersonal conflict. It's like, no, seriously, I won't name names, but people in my family, certainly there was one person in particular who seemed to love that. That person is no longer with us, but love that. That was like, every day I would get a call about, some neighbor or someone who was, interfering with this relative's life. And it was just a source of great excitement. Now, some people want to live like that. If you don't want to live like that, it's certainly better if you get some skills right under your belt of getting along with people, of settling arguments, dealing with conflict right away instead of festering. How many times have you gotten a call and spent half an hour, 45 minutes on the phone with a friend who's really, really annoyed with someone else? And it's yak, yak, yak to try to, figure out what happened. I think probably not to stereotype, but I think women tend to do this more than men because they're just engaged more at a different level than men do. But I've certainly spent hours of my life on the phone talking to friends who are completely upset and mad at some other person or colleague. And I'm not, saying that's not the right thing to do, because sometimes it really helps, but can be a huge drag on your time. It's funny, I have a teenage stepson who was away at college, and he came back after his first semester, and he was kind of like just nicer and easier to get along with. And I said, hey, college seemed to just, have a good effect on you. You just seem like nice. And he goes, not that he was terrible before, but he could be, a cranky teenager. And he said, what I realized? It's easier to be nice because there's less friction and there's less wasted time. Mm-hmm. I thought, oh gosh, could you just send a note out to, put this on Facebook so that all your friends will see this and all the other parents can benefit? And he was absolutely right. If he's cranky, then I'd say, why are you being cranky? And that would be a whole discussion. And then maybe he wouldn't get what he wanted because I was mad at him. And so it was like a huge time waster. And he realized, gosh, if I'm just like nice, I think I'll just get my way and there won't be as much conflict, and how much more efficient. So huge change in all of our lives. Now, I suppose it's a life stage thing. You have to go through what you have to go through to have this realization. But yes, this is a very long answer to a very smart question, which is if your life is less conflict ridden, you have a lot more time to just enjoy yourself.
Lesley, I love the point you made there about being nice, or let's just say being well, is just the most efficient and then likely the most effective way to do things. Just a quick personal story. We all have situations in our life interpersonally where, someone comes to us and they need help or they just need to be heard. And I remember I had this stage in my life where it seems like everyone who came, I think men do this a lot. I think women do it too, but you come to a man and you'll say, XYZ happened. And the man says, well, here's the solution. Let me tell you what to do about that. And that's actually not what the person who's speaking wants to hear. They just want to express themselves. They just want to get it off their chest. They just want to feel heard and verbally hugged, for lack of better terms. And the only way I could wrap my brain around stop trying to solve other people's problems when they don't ask you, when they just come to you to vent, for lack of better terms, is they essentially need to tell their story. And if you interrupt them, it's going to take longer. So, it's a really bad way to think about it, but just sitting there and listening and hearing the person, it is the most efficient and effective way to, let's resolve that situation. And when we look at life as just a series of situations that need to be resolved, which in some ways that is what life is, being there, it seems like what your research is, being there, being in the moment, being free from distractions, being fully present, and doing whatever it takes to make yourself that way is the way to have the most time. What do you think?
I think that's pretty good. Or does it necessarily make more time, or is it just that the time you have you'll feel like you have more time because you were really engaged in the moment? I think that's key. I would add one thing about your story when people are venting, which is really true. It's very, very healthy in some ways to vent, right? Because you're not pretending that there's not a problem. Is that sometimes people vent for too long. So what you can do is you can interrupt if it feels like the venting is taking up too much of your precious time, and you can say, I think what you're saying is this. And you can kind of tell them, read back to them. It's called mirroring or something like that in psychological jargon, what's going on. And that can often stop them. It's as if they need someone to encapsulate their emotion. It sounds like you're really mad at your boss because he was really unfair to you. They'll go, yeah, that's it. And then maybe you can, then move on. Because I do think listening is great and not always trying to problem solve, but I do think some of the reasons people try to problem solve is because they can't handle listening to a very long complaint session. So that's just my little 2 cents on that. But yes, I do think, I think the healthier you are, the less conflicts you have, the less time you waste on being ill, whether it's of body or mind, the more time you'll have to do things that will it's reinforcing, because then the more time you'll have to do things that are healthy, which then make you healthier, which makes you less likely to waste your time being unhealthy.
Yeah, maybe absolutely. Maybe a silly analogy. Tell me what you think about this, Lesley. Again, didn't formulate it completely, just wrote down some notes, so forgive me if it's not perfect. Let's say, let's use the analogy of life as like trying to drive from whatever. You're in Boston, from Boston to Seattle, not Boston, you're in Brooklyn, from Brooklyn to Seattle. And if you have a car which is really run down and not at peak performance, you could say, I'm going to save some time, just get in my car and start driving from Brooklyn to Seattle. And the car will never go above 40 miles an hour, and it keeps breaking down along the way. You have to stop at repair shops, but you sure got started on that trip efficiently, right? Well, no, not really. Would it maybe have been a more effective use of time to ensure that that car can go at top speed, that it doesn't need to go to the repair shop. At the end of the day, in that latter scenario, you'd probably get to Seattle a heck of a lot faster.
I agree.
Well, there we go.
I agree. So you're talking about preparedness.
Yes.
Preparedness, yes. Yes. I also think sometimes it's not always, I agree with what you're saying totally, but I also think sometimes it's nice to just think, it's not, the goal should not always be faster. And just like say that a couple of times during the day on things that, non-essential tasks maybe. The goal is not always faster. There's a whole slow food movement, and a lot of people doing meditation and yoga, and it's the opposite of fast. You go in there and there's really in most yoga practices, there's really no benefit to doing something faster. I think that's why people like it. It's like, hey, actually slow is kind of nice. We live in a world that's all about the faster, the more you can pack into your day and your life, the better. But sometimes just taking something and thinking, I'm just going to do this slowly, it's kind of nice. It's kind of a relief.
Lesley, I love that nuance. It's actually not a nuance, it's another dimension. Tell me what you think about this, going back to the car analogy. If you had that car that was able to travel efficiently and effectively, while your focus may not be to getting to Seattle faster, if it's a beautiful drive, and if you're able to look out the window and you're able to have the wind in your hair and you're able to enjoy the scenery, one, the drive might not seem to take as long, and two, you'll enjoy the drive, and that's pretty darn important too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Who wants to have anything breaking down? There's really nothing that fun about it. I suppose that you could turn it into an adventure, but no. It's the analogy, right, of yourself and taking care and being prepared, and you're going to have a much nicer ride if you're not at the doctor's office or at the hospital or whatever than if you are.
Well, Lesley, to bring it back down from the to bring it down back from the metaphysical to the practical and tactical and day-to-day, to wrap up, what were the 3 or so things you found in your research that, for example, we all know people watch a lot of television, but are there things that you were just shocked, 3 things you were just shocked at the amount of time that are non-obvious people spent on them?
I'm just going to tweak that question and tell you something that I found kind of fascinating, which is people always say, how long does love last? How like romantic love. And maybe people don't always say, but I was kind of curious. And they're actually it's a real chemical reaction in your brain. Like when you fall in love, like fall, and it goes on for more than, 3 days, it lasts like a year or two when those chemicals are just making you like elated and crazy all at the same time. And then after that, if you're still with the person and you're seeing them clearly and you still are interested, it's a different kind of infatuation and love. But there are really chemicals in your brain that are making you whacked out and happy, and that those chemicals really do dissipate after a year or two. And it's not to say you're not in love or you're not romantic. It's just a very different experience. So I thought that was really fascinating that they actually were able to, check in on people's brain chemicals and find out that there's something real going on there, and that it has, a beginning and an end. Who could live in that state of being in love for very long? You'd just never get anything done. You'd be out of your mind. So that was one thing I found really fascinating. I also thought it was really interesting that people read more than you think they do. We think, oh my gosh, people, all they do is send tweets and texts. But I think people actually, and the older people get, the more they sit down and really read books. And that was very heartening. I guess we're so steeped in all the negative about how much time, especially teenagers, we like to pick on them because they've had all this amazing technology thrown at them, so they can't bear to just watch TV. They want to text and tweet and Facebook and whatever at the same time. It's not really their fault, but people do still really read books. So I found that really nice. And if you on the bestseller list, if you go on sites like Goodreads, you see there's people very actively involved. But I was beginning to think no one had any attention span at all anymore.
Well, that is, as one author speaking to another, that is certainly a heartening finding.
Isn't it heartening? Yeah. I'm trying to think of like one other really juicy tidbit from the book. I guess how quickly things can be done when they need to be done. Like, for instance, the Empire State Building was built in record time, like a year or so. And, other other skyscrapers take years and years to complete. But the idea was the quicker that it was built, they were also in a competition to be the tallest building in the world. The quicker something's built, also, the more quickly they can make money doing it. So I thought that was interesting. It was like, we really got to get this done. Let's get it done. So that was kind of fascinating, especially because, it was many years ago. We didn't have all the, advances that we have now in building and in the kind of, searching for the words, but in the kind of engineering feats that we've been able to accomplish. So I thought that was really interesting.
Absolutely. Well, folks, Lesley is just a treasure trove of information and insight, and her book is called The Book of Times. And again, very highly recommended, just like we talk about eating smarter and exercising smarter, how we perceive and use our time and doing that smarter, man, that's really a multiplier I think we could all leverage to live better. And you can learn more about Lesley just as a journalist and author and woman at Lesley Alderman, and that's Lesley with a Y, lesleyalderman.com. The book is called The Book of Times. Very fun just to browse and also fun to read cover to cover. Lesley, what's next for you?
I have another book idea. It starts with the book of, and I won't tell you the next word.
Well, it's a book. Okay, that's good. We've got that.
It's a secret. Another book, more yoga, continue to do yoga. And I'm also going to start, I'm going to go back to school and take some classes. It's such a great thing to do after, you have your grow up, you go to school, you do it all sort of automatically, or I did, graduate from college, move on, work. So I'm going to go back and take some classes, actually in psychology.
Ooh.
We'll see where that goes. That was what I majored in as an undergrad. So a little work, a little academics, and a little play in the form of yoga. How's that sound?
I think it's the book of busy. Maybe she will have to be if you write an autobiography. How about that?
No, it won't be the book of busy. But you know what? I will put you on my first to know list.
Excellent. Well,
you'll find out.
Lesley will certainly appreciate your time today. Just kidding.
It was a pleasure. It was really fun to talk to you.
Folks, her name is Lesley Alderman. The book is The Book of Times. Learn more about her at lesleyalderman.com. Grab her book wherever books can be sold. And remember, this week and every week after, eat smarter, exercise smarter, and per today's conversation, think of time smarter and live better. Chat with you soon.